Understanding Islam. Combating stereotypes with facts and reality. Some circles, particularly in the West, view Islam as a religion synonymous with violence. This stereotype is not only misleading but also ignores the peaceful and tolerant essence of Islamic teachings. Media often reinforces this misconception by focusing on conflicts in the Muslim world while overlooking the reality of the majority of Muslims who live harmoniously. Indonesia and Malaysia, for instance, provide concrete evidence that Islam can thrive in a multicultural context without violence. This article will demonstrate that stereotypes about Islam are baseless by explaining the true teachings of Islam, analyzing the roots of conflicts in the Muslim world, highlighting models of tolerance in Southeast Asia, and proposing concrete steps to combat Islamophobia. Islamic teachings: peace as the core, not violence. Islam means peace. The claim that Islam legitimizes violence contradicts its fundamental meaning. The word Islam derives from salam, which means peace. The Quran, the primary source of Islamic teachings, affirms this principle. In Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 256, it states, "There is no compulsion in religion." This verse is not merely a statement but a command that prohibits coercion in matters of faith and guarantees religious freedom. If Islam were inherently violent, why would its sacred text explicitly reject compulsion? Moreover, the Quran places immense value on human life. Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, verse 32, declares that killing one person without just cause, such as in punishment for murder or grave corruption, is equivalent to killing all of humanity. This verse underscores Islam's condemnation of violence and its prioritization of life preservation. Thus, accusations that Islam endorses violence are clear distortions. Jihad, struggle, not arbitrary war. The concept of jihad is often misrepresented as a holy war aimed at spreading Islam through force. This is a significant misunderstanding. In Islamic tradition, the greater jihad is actually the internal struggle against one's own desires and evils, while the lesser jihad refers to physical struggle, which, by the way, is only permitted in self-defense, not aggression. Even in warfare, there are strict rules that apply. Civilians, places of worship, and non-military infrastructure must remain unharmed. This ethical framework honestly, starkly contrasts with the Western narrative of jihad, which often ignores these contexts and principles, revealing that the stereotype just does not reflect authentic Islamic teachings. Conflicts in the Muslim world. It's really politics, not religion. The real roots of conflict. Conflicts in Muslim-majority countries are frequently cited as proof that Islam is violent. However, if you look a bit deeper, you'll see that religion is not the primary cause. For example, the Syrian conflict began with popular protests against an authoritarian regime in 2011 and escalated into a civil war fueled by foreign intervention and geopolitical rivalries. Religion is, honestly, merely a superficial element, not the core issue. Similarly, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is fundamentally a territorial dispute rooted in colonial history, not a religious battle. Factors such as economic inequality, resource competition, and foreign interference actually play far more significant roles than Islamic doctrine. If Islam were truly the catalyst for violence, why do most Muslim countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei not experience perpetual conflict? This reality really demonstrates that the stereotype is just an oversimplification. Let's talk about the media's role in shaping stereotypes. Western media often exacerbates misunderstandings through biased reporting. Whenever a Muslim commits an act of violence, their religion is immediately spotlighted as the motive. In contrast, when non-Muslims commit similar acts, their faith is rarely mentioned. For instance, mass shooters in the United States are often described as troubled individuals rather than representatives of their religion. This double standard kind of fosters the illusion that Islam is uniquely violent, even though data shows that the vast majority of Muslims live peacefully. Indonesia and Malaysia are, living proof of Islam's tolerance. Indonesia in particular really stands out for its diversity and harmony. With over 230 million Muslims, it's actually the world's largest Muslim majority country. Yet, Islam here isn't associated with intolerance. The national motto, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or unity in diversity, serves as a foundation for blending Islam with the country's rich cultural and religious diversity. Pancasila, which is the state ideology, actually incorporates Islamic values like justice and humanity, while still respecting other faiths. The first principle, belief in one God, is inclusive, acknowledging a supreme being without favoring any particular religion. In everyday life, tolerance is, well, pretty evident. Mosques, churches, temples, and shrines all coexist peacefully. Religious holidays like Eid, Christmas, and Vesak are celebrated nationally, which really helps foster a sense of shared identity. If Islam were inherently violent, how could Indonesia, with its vast Muslim population, sustain such harmony? In reality, Islam in Indonesia reinforces social unity rather than division. Malaysia, is a country that really exemplifies multiculturalism with Islam as the foundation. In Malaysia, where about 60% of the population is Muslim, Islam is the official religion, but the constitution actually guarantees freedom of worship for everyone. The One Malaysia initiative, for example, promotes unity amid all this ethnic and religious diversity. National recognition of festivals like Hari Raya, which is Eid, Chinese New Year, and Deepavali really reflects the country's commitment to inclusivity. Malaysia's education and political systems are, well, structured to accommodate all communities, showing that Islam can absolutely underpin a harmonious multicultural society. Here are some demographic facts that might challenge our usual perceptions. The Muslim populations of Indonesia and Malaysia actually far exceed those of the Middle East. In fact, Indonesia alone has more Muslims than all Arab countries combined. If stereotypes about Islam were accurate, this region should be rife with chaos. Instead, both nations exemplify how the majority of the world's Muslims live in peace and tolerance, delivering a powerful counter to biased media narratives. Why does tolerance thrive in Southeast Asia? Well, it's due to adaptation to local culture. Islam in Indonesia and Malaysia has evolved through a process of cultural adaptation, integrating with local traditions such as Malay and Javanese customs. The concept of Islam Nusantara in Indonesia really exemplifies this. It combines Islamic teachings with indigenous wisdom, resulting in a more inclusive and flexible interpretation of the faith. This approach avoids rigidity and allows Islam to be embraced without erasing local cultural identities, setting Southeast Asia apart from regions where Islam is practiced more strictly. The role of Islamic organizations in education is, honestly, pretty significant. Prominent organizations like Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah in Indonesia, which, by the way, boast millions of members, consistently advocate for a moderate and tolerant form of Islam. They actively reject extremism and promote pluralism. Additionally, traditional Islamic boarding schools known as pesantren teach not only religious knowledge but also values of tolerance and interfaith dialogue. This educational approach actually fosters a generation of Muslims who understand their faith in a contextual and nuanced manner. Combating Islamophobia requires practical steps. Dialogue and education are key. Islamophobia will not dissipate without concerted effort. Interfaith and intercultural dialogue must be intensified through conferences, cultural exchanges, and public education initiatives. Credible Muslim scholars should be involved to explain the true teachings of Islam. So, media outlets must, really stop oversimplifying conflicts and instead provide balanced, contextual reporting. Public diplomacy by Muslim communities is, really important. Muslim communities, particularly in the West, must actively demonstrate Islam's peaceful nature through social contributions in education, healthcare, and humanitarian work. Muslim leaders should also vocally condemn extremism while reaffirming that such actions contradict Islamic teachings. And honestly, these tangible actions speak louder than words in shifting perceptions. In conclusion, Islam is not its stereotype. Islam is not a religion of violence. It is a religion of peace that cherishes life and tolerance. Conflicts in the Muslim world do not reflect its teachings, but are instead driven by political and historical factors. Indonesia and Malaysia stand as proof that Islam can be a cornerstone of harmony in diverse societies. To combat Islamophobia, a collective effort is essential. Muslims must exemplify their faith's values, media must report fairly, and society must remain open to understanding. Judging Islam by the actions of a few extremists is as illogical as judging an ocean by a single drop of water. The peaceful reality of the Muslim majority is the strongest rebuttal to misguided stereotypes.